No matter how much you love Eurovision, and trust me, I really love Eurovision, you have to admit that some songs in the contest are just awful. Today, we are going to count down the 10 worst Eurovision songs so far of this decade. Over the course of this video, we are going to talk about the Nepo babies, the artists on the run from the Spanish authorities, and the TikTok stars concealing their true age that help make this contest what it is. We all know that Eurovision wouldn't be the same if there weren't some songs that were just awful. These 10, though, will take you through some serious twists and turns, so settle in, assume the brace position, and don't go anywhere. Very quickly, before we jump into it, if you do enjoy this video, make sure to like it and you can subscribe to the channel down below. In addition to that, my socials, my editor Jay's socials, all in the description. You can follow us on any of those, and you can get us one step closer to our goal for 2025 of making this a full-time job by donating to us on Ko-fi or subscribing on Patreon. Once again, all the details in the description. Without further ado, let's start with number 10 on our list. It's from Malta, 2022, Emma Muscat, with her song, I Am What I Am.
Take it or leave it, I am what I am. Come on. I am what I am.
We're starting with someone who essentially is on this list by choice. Emma Muscat actually won the Maltese national selection in 2022 with a different song. That song sounded like this.
This time I'll find a place I'd rather be.
After she ditched that one, she also considered another song that if you watched the contest this year, you would have heard. That's because Sand by Saba was initially offered to Emma for the 2022 contest. Given it didn't qualify, I'm guessing she didn't miss out on much. What I'm trying to say is, Emma had a lot of not very good options here, but she wouldn't have been on this list, even if she didn't qualify, with the original song from the national selection. Unfortunately for her, and for all of us, for some reason, she decided I Am What I Am was a better choice for the contest. This is one of the blandest and most generic pop songs you will ever hear. This is the kind of song that emerges from songwriting camps, which are stuffed full of Scandinavian songwriters, that then get shopped all around Europe after they're rejected by the Swedish and Norwegian national selections. This is one of the most irritating and lowest quality examples of that phenomenon, and to be honest, this is so formulaic that it kind of irritates me. It doesn't get any better when you look to the lyrics and see that there are a series of bland platitudes about how Emma won't change for anyone. Hence the name, I Am What I Am. Emma doesn't want to be judged, and she just wants to be herself. You are what you are, Emma, and what that is a Nepo baby born to a family so extraordinarily rich that they were named in the Paradise Papers. What you have here is enormous amounts of financial backing, which has gone on buying some shitty pop songs off of the shelf before having the abrupt realization that the point at which you can't buy your way out of any problem by waving a wad of cash in the direction of whatever the problem is, suddenly you hit a wall. Unfortunately for Emma, I'm conventionally attractive and filthy rich, and I'm not afraid to say it, is not a very inspiring message. This song, just to be clear, would be trite nonsense, even if it was someone who isn't in Emma's position singing it. It's just that this context really adds the bullshit icing to the insincerity cake. As for the live performance, I guess it was fine, and Emma can sing perfectly well. But the song and the stage show came together to produce something that felt more like a week 4 or 5 X Factor performance than a Eurovision entry. It's down to the bottom of the leaderboard and then to the sing-off, where, incidentally, much like the X Factor, she loses on a tie-break to an Irish woman singing a disaster bop. Next up is number 9, and for this we're going to 2023. It's Azerbaijan, Tural Turan X, with their song, Tell Me More.
Tell me more about me. You are.
Let me start this off by giving Tural and Turan a piece of advice. Maybe the girl who they're trying to get in contact with in the weird phone message section at the start of this song isn't returning their calls because they're starting every voicemail message with this sound. Some people on this list had a song that in theory could have been good, but died a death on the stage. Some of these songs were so dead on arrival that they didn't even have a chance to butcher it themselves. This is one of those examples, and that's why the fact that these two are genuinely good singers doesn't save them from being on here. It's also a shame that they undo the good work and the fact that they sing well by the fact that they also rap really badly.
I don't know if I'm someone or someone is me. I'm running from fate. I'm giving up my dream.
Rap in general just does not work in the context of this song. It's not helped by the fact that they don't really sell it live either, and the performance is so low energy that it falls even flatter than it otherwise would have. I will briefly speak in their defense in that these two are both absolutely lovely people. One of them even showed showed up to my friend's birthday party during Eurovision week. They also did a much better job with their outfits than just about everyone else on this list. They actually did this to their own detriment in the end. It caused a minor scandal in Azerbaijan when their turquoise carpet outfits were deemed by the media there to be just a little bit too fruity. All of this, of course, does not undo the fatal flaws that have earned this 9th place on this list. It's a song that will send you to sleep. Nothing and nobody could have transformed it into a contender to make it to the final. That combined with the extremely low effort staging and low energy performance, and it ends up here. Number 8 now, and we're staying in 2023 with Denmark. That was Riley with his song Breaking My Heart. This is a bit of an odd one because before the contest, it was actually extremely unclear how old Riley was. His Wikipedia page at the time stated that he was 20, and he previously posted a TikTok with a baby photo of himself saying it all began in 2002. After one Reddit user went down an extremely deep rabbit hole, it was eventually confirmed via this grainy photo of Riley's driving license found on the Facebook page of a Faroese driving school that he was actually 25. Yes, this man is 25. I'd love to know his skincare routine because he looks about 16. With that mystery aside, unfortunately, his performance at Eurovision raised just as many questions as his age did. This one was a bit of a comedy of errors, starting from the very start. Right at the beginning of his live performance, this heart-shaped cutout on camera took about 10 seconds to remove. If you listen carefully, you can hear him frantically scrabbling at it.
Trying to start something on in my head. Big skies, red wine.
After what feels like an age, it finally comes off. But by this point, he's already knocked and he's already off his game. Luckily for him, the chorus of this song is quite catchy, and that offered an opportunity to potentially get it back on track. Unfortunately, things didn't quite turn out that way. This started with the most awkward choreographed jacket adjustments that I've ever seen.
If we could go back to the start, life would still be falling apart.
Combined with a vacant 20-second long stare into the camera that just made me feel weird. The vocals were nowhere as well because Riley's voice sounded so thin as it had done at every performance throughout the season. While nerves were definitely playing a part, it was a big stage, he was alone on the stage, and he'd already had a mess up at the beginning, there had been questions over his performance ever since his actual voice had been buried in pre-recorded backing singers at the national final. They tried to do that again here, but unfortunately at Eurovision, the rules are just a bit too tight for you to be able to get away with that. If there is one thing that this song could have used to cover for some of Riley's shortcomings, and the fact that it was a weak song to begin with, it was the presence of backing dancers. This would have supported Riley, it would have made him more confident, and it would have made the performance feel more alive. But for reasons that escape me, they didn't bring any. If you can afford this giant, ridiculous spinning prop, you can afford a couple of dancers. Riley got completely swallowed up by the stage as a result. That meant that there was never any chance for him to recover from the death spiral that started the moment the song hit the first note. This song is catchy, and with the right performance, maybe it could have escaped its fate. Unfortunately, there is no such luck here, and having gotten literally everything wrong, Denmark and Riley end up on this list. As a side note, I am never going to stop thinking he looks like Barbara Pravi. Number 7 is next, and it's Ireland now, again from 2023, Wild Youth, with their song, We Are One.
Tonight, we are one.
Before we get on to anything else, I have some serious questions to ask to the person who dressed these guys for this performance. Because while the performance was certainly not serving, the lead singer, unfortunately, was doing exactly that literally for the entire 3-minute runtime. The funny thing is, Conor O'Donoghue, who is the server in question, isn't even the normal lead singer of this band. This guy on the keyboards is. But from a Wild Youth perspective, Eurovision was always Conor's baby, so he took on the lead for this performance. I do wonder if he regrets it now, because for the duration of this, he looked absolutely terrified. That came through in his vocals as well, because he was more than a little ropey. To be fair, coming into Eurovision with a song as bland as this, I probably would have had similar feelings. Because he could have put in a world-class vocal performance and this still would have got nowhere near the final. They didn't help themselves with the staging either. This performance was so static that any little bit of energy it had was totally drained out. The weird disembodied hand he reaches out to while singing At Least You're Not Alone was one of the worst executed gimmicks of the year. And to be honest, it looked more ridiculous than inspiring. What I find really frustrating is that Wild Youth are actually so much better than this performance would imply. Sure, their music isn't revolutionary, but I saw them live a month after Eurovision and they were really good. This is kind of bizarre given that they're on this list of all places to be. I would genuinely look at their back catalogue. What you'll find is every single song of theirs is better than this one. It just adds to the frustration that they clearly were capable of better, but brought such a nothing burger to the contest. The thing that tops it off, though, is the way that Conor O'Donoghue handled the failure to qualify with precisely zero grace. He suggested on Instagram that Europe never gives Ireland a chance. This was ridiculous enough at the time, given that Ireland has won the contest more than any other country, and looks even more ridiculous in retrospect, given how well Bambi Thug did this year. To be honest, I find it extraordinary that Conor ever thought that this song had any shot at qualification whatsoever. From the bland to the bizarre, it's time for number 6, for which we're going to Georgia 2021. That's Tornika Kipiani with his song, You.
And I wanna be with you.
A lot of artists were carried over from 2020 to 2021 after the contest was cancelled, and Tornika was among them. Both of his entries were bizarre fever dreams, but in very different ways. Take Me As I Am from 2020 was at least energetic, if also a little bit odd. Unfortunately, You was just incredibly dull. In addition to that, it just got more and more bizarre the further along you went, and it shared the same terrible production quality that his song from 2020 had as well. This song is a slow ballad, but it's delivered with all of the subtlety and tenderness of a jackhammer. While Tornika is just about in tune, the tone of his voice is a total mismatch for this song. It doesn't work at all. This is already pretty clear towards the start, but just when you're starting to get used to it, things get even weirder. Just as you are on the verge of being sent to sleep by boredom, Tornika does this. This felt so sudden that when I first saw it in rehearsals, I actually jumped from shock. It's completely surreal and wrapped up in what just felt like an extremely angry performance. The song isn't very good, but at the very least you can do it justice by giving it the tenderness and gentle feeling that it needs. I just felt like I was being shouted at. This is a love song, and I get that it's trying to be simple and not too wordy, but you had an entire year to prepare for this, and you came back with 76 words. These are the entire lyrics for the song. That's the whole thing. Like I said, a whole year to prepare, and the best you could come up with was sunshine, I wanna touch you, wind blow, I wanna see you. Combine that with an extremely underwhelming and static staging, broken up with a projection effect in the bridge that just doesn't have anything like the effect they wanted, and you have something that goes past the normal levels of underwhelming ballads in Eurovision into a much stranger place. This richly deserves its place on this list. Unfortunately, I have to inform you, things get much worse from here. I'm pretty sure one of my remaining choices in this top 5 is going to stir some controversy. For that reason, I am looking forward to hearing your comments down below on what you think of them. Let's get on with it and talk about number 5 first. This one's from 2023 and it's from San Marino. Peaked Jacks with their song Like an Animal. I've got to be honest here, this song made me feel really gross. The lyrics, I can smell you like an animal and I'll chase you on the dance floor, are weird enough by themselves, but when he's yelling it at me like that, it makes it 100 times worse. Especially when the choreography and the styling of the singer makes him come across really creepy. It's like they set out to try and write and stage an anthem for middle-aged men hitting on 19-year-old girls in bars. Unfortunately, they succeeded, because this is unprofessional, it's crass, and it's just uncomfortable to listen to. The subject matter and the lyrics aren't where the problems end though, because the vocal performance was equally terrible. Unfortunately, when it came to the big note in this song, the singer didn't get close to hitting it at all. This is really rammed home by the fact that this note is then repeated 3 further times in quick succession. So everyone was very well acquainted with the fact that he could not hit it by the time the performance ended. In addition to that, every chorus had similarly high notes that were attempted and performed to drunk karaoke in a bar standard, ensuring that the vocal car crash lasted for the full 3-minute runtime. Much like the previous song on this list too, the song itself is just really amateurish, and the way the main guitar riff sticks out of the mix and clashes with the vocals has always bothered me. This got 0 points in the semi-final, and while it won't have been helped by the fact that the far superior Joker Out were in the semi-final with them and therefore swept up all of the rock-adjacent boy band fans, this was going to be dead on arrival and probably come down the bottom of the order even without that. For all the reasons stated, I don't think this is a particularly controversial inclusion on this list. While that one isn't controversial though, I think this one might be. Number 4 is Lavia, 2021, and it's Samantha Tina with her song The Moon is Rising. Firstly, I know some people will appreciate that weird vocalization that forms part of the backing track. But for me, it just came across as totally bizarre from the first moment. That's not a deal breaker by itself, of course, and if everything else had come together, I don't think I'd really have much of a problem with this song. The second problem I have is more egregious, but equally, it's still not fatal. That is that the song is staged in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. There's hardly any movement, despite the fact that the song is energetic and upbeat. And to make this worse, you have these 3 backing singers standing entirely static for the entire performance, which just acts like an additional energy vacuum that Samantha is left to counteract all by herself. In addition to that, with how busy the LEDs are on the floor and on the screen, she often just gets completely lost in a sea of colour. It's just so loud and confusing. As if to kick Samantha when she's down, there is even a moment where a cameraman blocks the shot by accident. Again though, if the live performance had been great, I could have forgiven all of this, and it would be nowhere near this list. Unfortunately, this was totally out of tune. Like, it was not even close to being in tune at any point. I don't think she hit a single note. I don't know what happened because Samantha Tina is usually a really accomplished vocalist, but this was one of the most desperately bad vocal performances at Eurovision in years, to the point that it's actually kind of difficult to watch. It's a slow motion car crash that just gets worse and worse the further along you go. Even fans of the song in the studio were massively disappointed by this live performance, and to be honest, I really feel for people who came into the contest with this being one of their favourites. If one of my favourites dropped a live performance like that, I would be absolutely gutted. The audience in the room weren't really on board with it either, because twice in the performance, she awkwardly calls for the crowd to get into it, and they respond with a half-hearted, almost embarrassed cheer. As I've said before, this is an interesting song, and I understand, though, while it's not to my taste, there are people who would really like this in the studio cut. A lot of the reasons I dislike this are much more related to my own personal taste over anything else. With that in mind, though, I think one objective critique of this is that the structure of the song is just totally unintelligible. It blunders from verses to choruses to drops in a way that just makes your head spin. And when bum notes are raining down on you in every direction, like they are during this performance, it just kind of activates my fight or flight. If there are any choices in this video that will carry more pushback than any others, it's this one. But for me, there is just no recovering from this absolute horror show of a performance. It's time for the top 3, and we're starting with Bulgaria in 2022. Intelligent Music Project with their song Intention.
Anytime I've always known I'm never enough safe to soul. I took the fight, but was I right?
This song was only Bulgaria's Eurovision entry because the broadcaster had run out of money and they had no interest in the contest anymore. Presumably, they had spent it all on the 2 songs from Victoria for the previous 2 years. The reason they stayed in was that this participation was self-funded, and there'll be more on that in a minute. Something similar actually happened to Slovakia, where in their final year in the contest, they sent a rock band that did terribly and then walked off into the sunset, never to be seen again. That said, given how awful this song is, I don't know whether Bulgaria left because of money or just out of shame. shame. Eurovision season before the contest for this band was a little rough, and this mostly revolved around the fact that they were conspicuously absent from both of the pre-parties that took place in Spain. It emerged that the lead singer of the band, Ronnie Romero, was allegedly a wanted criminal in the country. Ronnie had missed a court summons in relation to allegedly threatening his ex-partner. She had also previously had a restraining order against him. Ronnie claims that a lot of the stories about his legal status were either exaggerated or untrue, which is hilarious when you put it up against the alleged scheduling conflicts that supposedly prevented the band from making it to any of the Spanish events. I would have thought that entering a country where you would immediately be arrested is a perfect example of never being in the safety zone, but there we go. It's always sad when artists don't live up to the ideals that they profess in their music. In all seriousness, the lyrics of this song make absolutely no sense for most of the time. Given that the man singing "Replaying My Crimes" has committed actual crimes, allegedly, it's more than a little crass as well. It honestly feels a bit like an AI has been asked to write a rock song and then they have just taken whatever it's given them without making any changes at all. Much like the previous rock song on this list, it's also extremely amateurish, and it doesn't take much investigation to see why. The mastermind of Intelligent Music Project and also the sole writer and producer of this song is this guy, Milan Vrbevsky. He's a Bulgarian businessman in his mid-50s. That is where the real motivation of this participation comes from. The entire thing was the product of a midlife crisis / ego trip from that guy. He has more money than sense, and he pays washed up rock stars and B-listers to perform the songs that he writes. Once you have this piece of information, everything else about this makes perfect sense. From the terrible lyrics to the awful production to the fact that they had enough money to fund self-participation. And of course, down to the terrible staging that was clearly done in 10 minutes as an afterthought. This was a really sad ending to Bulgaria's time in Eurovision. Let's not forget that before this they had Polly Geneva and Christian Kostov, that weird supergroup in 2018, but they were still alright, and Victoria in 2020 and 2021. Going from that to this was a terrible shame. We are on to number 2 now, and this is where things get really, really bad. It's time for Jendrik from Germany in 2021 with his song I Don't Feel Hate.
'Cause I don't feel hate.
This has to be one of the most insufferable songs that has ever been sent to Eurovision. This is so awful that when it leaked, a great many people thought it was a wind-up rather than the actual entry. Unfortunately, we were wrong. Basically, every element of this is a complete musical atrocity. Without vocals, this sounds like background music for a department store advertising a sale. With vocals, it loses even that performance, and therefore, as a piece of music, becomes utterly useless. Jendrik is trying to be funny here, and if you watch his interview that he did during Eurovision with Nikki de Jager, he is actually very funny in the right circumstances. Unfortunately, he could not have fallen wider of the mark than he did with this song. I will freely admit that I have a pretty big anti-ukulele agenda in general, but that combined with the really annoying whistling,
I don't feel hate. I just feel sorry.
and the once again utterly ridiculous lyrics honestly makes me think that they engineered this song in a lab to annoy me specifically as much as possible. This is what happens if, as a country, you just phone it in and make zero effort whatsoever. Like, seriously, I cannot for the life of me think how the German broadcaster, even the German broadcaster, would look at this and think, yeah, this is the best option for Eurovision, this'll do great. It was never likely that he was going to get off of the bottom of the scoreboard, and the only reason he did was because James Newman was even worse. Sorry, that kind of spoils the number 1 on this list, but you knew it was going to be that anyway. More on that in a moment, though. The other thing with ridiculous garbage like this is that it has a bigger impact over the several years following the contest. If you give a signal like this to the domestic music industry, that you give that little of a shit about Eurovision, that you'll send something as terrible as I Don't Feel Hate, then they're not going to take you seriously either. It's stunts like this that make it even more difficult for Germany to pull its face off of the floor and actually get better at Eurovision again. Germans watching this, just remember, your taxes paid for it. Given the subject matter of the song, I guess I'm kind of proving Jendrik's point by having a massive rant and then putting it on this list. That said, he's very lucky that he avoided the number 1 spot. I have already spoiled who is number 1, but there are a few honourable honourable mentions that I want to get out of the way first. Let's run through them quickly now. Romania 2023 was absolutely awful. Poor Teodor Andrei has been through enough and he doesn't need to be put on this list and have another boot stuck in. Given the way that the Romanian broadcaster screwed him over, that would be a bit like kicking a puppy. Israel 2022, Michael Ben David, not just for the fact that the song is bad, but he is probably universally accepted to be the single most insufferable Eurovision participant of all time. I want to shout out Albania 2024 for delivering a masterclass in how to revamp a song in a way that completely ruins it, as well as Spain 2021 and Azerbaijan 2024 for being so exceptionally dull that they basically sent you to sleep. That said, all of those pale in comparison to our ultimate winner. Only one song was ever going to take this place. James Newman from the UK in 2021 with his song Embers.
Light up the road.
We really deserve to be number one at this list. And all I can say is, well done us, we finally came top of something in Eurovision. Seriously though, Embers is such a unique song in so many awful ways, and we've talked about it a couple of times on this channel before. It was generally thought that under the new voting system, which offers twice as many points as before, it would basically be impossible to get 0 overall. Well, we soared to new heights with this one because that's exactly what we did. And the fact that James took it like an absolute champ doesn't make it any less of a disaster. The reality is, while the studio version was not atrocious, being simply only very bad, every single other element was a total disaster. James Newman, God love him, had absolutely no charisma live whatsoever. In addition to that, his live vocal was absolutely terrible as well.
All feelings change and seasons fade, but nothing will burn us out.
In his defense, some of this may have been down to nerves or overexcitement, but that doesn't change how bad it was, or the fact he has 0 stage presence, or the fact he really can't dance. Seriously, this was one of the least charismatic stage performances in recent Eurovision history. Secondly, we come to the staging, and this is where the horror really sets in. This jacket is a crime, but it pales in comparison to the true pièce de résistance of this entry. The giant trumpets. I learned to my horror after the contest that these were the single most expensive props ordered by any country that year. Not only was Embers an atrocity, both visually and sonically, it was the most expensive performance of any country. That is a truly spectacular failure. If you take a song that belongs on an advert for a budget airline trying to sell package holidays, and then make every other element expensive and terrible, this is what you get. It's tacky, it's poorly performed, and it gets worse every time you hear it. James Newman, as I said, God love him, he took the terrible result very well. And I respect him for standing up, owning it, and not letting it take away from his experience. But for the rest of us, this is a trauma that is going to take some time to heal. With that, we've completed this list, and I am sure there will be defenders for most of these songs out there. So please, if I named a song on this list that you love, I would love to hear why you love it. So put your comments down below. I'm ready to listen to reasons why you think I should change. If you want to see me rank more things, then I have already done tier lists for winners, second, third, and last places in Eurovision since 2000, and you can catch all of those on my channel. You can also subscribe for new videos in the new year. After a short break for Christmas, we will be back to a weekly schedule from the beginning of January. Once again, you can follow my socials, they're in the description. You can also help this get closer to becoming mine and Jay's full-time job by donating on Ko-fi or Patreon. For now, as this is the very last video of 2024, I wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who has supported us this year. It's been really, really amazing to see how far the channel has come in the last 12 months. Hopefully, we will be able to keep moving things forward in 2025 as well. Take care, have an amazing festive period, and I will see you in the new year.